all 9 of Marybeth Tinning's children died before they were 5 years old. She confessed to killing 3 of them, but was convicted of only 1 case of second-degree murder. No one has any clear idea of what motivated her to kill, unless this was the ultimate case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a parent or caregiver covertly inflicts injury on a child to gain attention, praise, or sympathy. Marybeth Tinning, née Rowe, was born in 1942 in the small town of Duanesburg, 10 miles south of Schenectady, upstate New York. She complained once of being an unwanted child and was shuffled between relatives in her early life, but there was a war on. She also complained of child abuse. "My father hit me with a fly swatter," she said, "because he had arthritis and his hands were not of much use, and when he locked me in my room, I guess he thought I deserved it." This does not appear to have been an extreme form of discipline, given the standards of the time, but it was said that she tried to kill herself several times as a child. She met her future husband, Joe Tinning, on a blind date in 1963. They married in 1965. Their first child, Barbara, was born in May 1967. Their second, Joseph Joner, in January 1970. The first to die was their third child, Jennifer, born on the 26th of December, 1971. She died on the 3rd of January 1972 of hemorrhagic meningitis and multiple brain abscesses that had developed in utero. As Jennifer never left hospital to be cared for by her mother, there was no indication of foul play. However, it had been pointed out that Marybeth's father died of a heart attack in October 1971. There is speculation that the 2 deaths, one closely following the other, pushed Marybeth over the edge. But there may have been a more sinister impulse at play. Jennifer looks to be the victim of a coat hanger. Dr. Michael Baden, former chief medical examiner of the city of New York, said, "Tinning had been trying to hasten her birth and only succeeded in introducing meningitis. The police theorized that she wanted to deliver the baby on Christmas Day, like Jesus. She thought her father, who had died while she was pregnant, would have been pleased." 17 days after the death of Jennifer, Marybeth took 2-year-old Joseph Jr. to the emergency room of Ellis Hospital in Schenectady, saying he had had some type of seizure. He was kept in for observation, but doctors could find nothing wrong with him. However, a few hours after his release on the 20th of January, Marybeth brought the boy back dead. "He was taking a nap," Marybeth told detectives in a later statement. "It was close to his birthday, and he had slept, taken a nap, slept unusually long. Unfortunately, I did not go in to check on him, and when I did, he appeared to be having respiratory problems, which I did not cause." She had told the doctors that she had found him tangled in the sheets, and his body had turned blue. His cause of death was listed as unknown, and no autopsy was performed. Deaths 2, 3, and 4. Barely 6 weeks later, on the 1st of March, 1972, Marybeth returned to the hospital with 4-year-old Barbara, saying the little girl was suffering from convulsions. The doctors wanted the child to stay overnight, but Marybeth insisted on taking her home. She came back the next day with Barbara, who was by then unconscious. A few hours later, she died, possibly of a rare brain disease known as Reyes syndrome. Asked about Barbara's death 12 years later, Marybeth said, "While we were sleeping, she called out to me and I went in, and she was having a convulsion. Guess I don't even remember whether I don't remember whether we took her by ambulance or whether we took her. But anyway, we got there and they did whatever they did. Within 90 days, 3 of the Tinnings' children were dead. Days after Barbara's death, Marybeth asked the Schenectady Department of Social Services about becoming a foster parent. She got a job as a waitress, and that autumn, the Tinning family took in a foster child named Robert. They kept him until January 1973, when they took in another foster child named Linda. She was returned when Marybeth became pregnant again. She gave birth to Timothy on the 22nd of November, 1973. Although he weighed just 5 pounds, Marybeth took him home 2 days later. She returned him to hospital after 3 weeks, dead. Marybeth told doctors she found him lifeless in his crib. Again, doctors found nothing medically wrong. Timothy seemed to be a normal baby. His death was listed officially as SIDS sudden infant death syndrome, also known as cot death. Marital problems. In 1974, things were not going well in the Tinnings' marriage. The couple argued over money, and Joe Tinning turned up in hospital with a near-fatal overdose of barbiturates. Apparently, Marybeth had tried to poison him, though Joe said he had attempted suicide. Marybeth then admitted to stealing money from her sister-in-law Carol and agreed to see a psychiatrist, but she escaped from the mental hospital without her family knowing. She then reported to the police that her home had been burgled, though it was later concluded that she had staged the robbery herself. Even so, the marriage stumbled on, and Marybeth was soon pregnant again, but she told a co-worker not to tell anyone, as God had told her to kill this one too. On the 30th of March, 1975, Marybeth gave birth to her 5th child, Nathan. He was barely 5 months old when Marybeth returned him to hospital, dead. She said she was driving her car with the baby in the front seat when he had suddenly stopped breathing. Again, there was no rational explanation. Doctors attributed his death to acute pulmonary edema or heart failure. In 1978, Marybeth and her husband made arrangements to adopt a child. One would have thought that, given their track record, the agency might have had some misgivings. Perhaps they felt pity for the unlucky couple. However, that same year, Marybeth fell pregnant again. They decided to keep both children. In August, a boy, Michael, came from the adoption agency, and on the 9th of October, a daughter named Mary Frances was born. On the 20th of January, 1979, she was returned to the emergency room. Marybeth said she had had some kind of seizure. She was revived, and the hospital recorded an aborted SIDS. After being treated, she was sent home, but returned on the 20th of February. Marybeth said she had found her in her cot, unconscious. She had suffered a full cardiac arrest and was irretrievably brain damaged. 2 days later, she died after Marybeth agreed to turn the life support system off. Again, SIDS was recorded as the cause of death. On the 19th of November that year, Marybeth gave birth to her 7th baby, Jonathan. In March 1980, he was returned to hospital unconscious. Revived, he was sent to Boston Hospital to be examined by experts who could find no medical reason as to why he had stopped breathing. He was sent home to his mother, but returned to hospital soon after. He died on the 24th of March, 1980, after 4 weeks on life support in Albany. On the 2nd of March, 1981, Marybeth showed up at her pediatrician's office with Michael, then 2.5 years old. He was wrapped in a blanket and unconscious. Marybeth told the doctor that she could not wake Michael that morning and had no idea what was wrong. She described what happened later to police. When I went in the morning to get him up and so we could go to the doctors, he was he was responsive to a point, but he was very limp and so on and so forth. And so, instead of calling an ambulance, I went from our house, put him in the car, literally threw him in the car, and went to St. Clair's. I went to Dr. Melle's office and went in there, and by the time one of the doctors, I guess, took me, and they said that he died of viral pneumonia. When the doctor examined the boy, he was already dead. Later, a post-mortem found traces of pneumonia, but not enough to cause death. Since Michael was adopted, the theory that the deaths in the Tinning family might have had a genetic origin was discarded. There were other queries about Marybeth's odd behavior. When she first realized that Michael was sick that morning, Marybeth could have easily come straight to the emergency room, which was just across the street from where she lived, as she had done when the others had died. But instead, she let hours pass until the doctor's office opened. Birth of an 8th child. Now childless, Marybeth and Joe moved in with his parents in Duanesburg. They stayed for 11 months while Marybeth did a number of jobs, including working as a volunteer ambulance driver. They bought a trailer in Duanesburg that mysteriously caught fire. Marybeth was suspected. They moved back to Schenectady, and Marybeth quit the ambulance brigade after a stolen first aid box was found near her home. On the 22nd of August, 1985, Marybeth gave birth to her 8th child, Tammy Lynn. Like all the other children in Marybeth's care, she was destined to have a short life. On the 19th of December, next-door neighbor Cynthia Walter, a practical nurse, went shopping with Marybeth and later visited her home. "I stayed for a few minutes and I wanted to hold Tammy," Cynthia said, "but Marybeth asked me to give the baby back, so I handed her back and then I went home." Later that night, Cynthia received a frantic telephone call from Marybeth. "Cynthia," she said, "get over here right now." When she went next door to see what was wrong, she found Tammy Lynn lying on a changing table. "She wasn't moving," Walter testified. "She was purple, and I couldn't feel pulse or respiration. She was not breathing." She was rushed to the emergency room, where she was pronounced dead. Marybeth told Cynthia that Tammy Lynn had got tangled in a blanket, though the following day she did not seem in any way upset. Knowing the family history, the hospital staff were also suspicious. Even Joe had misgivings by then. "There were things to make me suspicious," he said, "but you have to trust your wife. She has her things to do, and as long as she gets them done, you don't ask no questions." That day, the Tinning family was visited by Betsy Mannix of Schenectady County's Department of Social Services and Bob Imfeld of the Schenectady Police Department regarding the death of Tammy Lynn. Blood was found on her pillow, and a post-mortem determined that she had been suffocated. Marybeth agreed to go to the police station where she was questioned and confessed to murdering Tammy Lynn, Timothy, and Nathan in a 36-page statement, which was disputed in court but allowed to stand. However, she denied killing any of the other children, although with the exception of Jennifer, she had been alone with each child at the time they died. Marybeth Tinning was only charged with the murder of Tammy Lynn, as there was forensic evidence to support the prosecution case. She had been indicted for the murders of Timothy and Nathan, but the charges were dropped. The jury took 3 days to convict her of second-degree murder, clearing her of deliberately killing the child and finding her guilty of the lesser degree of homicide by her depraved indifference to human life. Apparently, they were convinced of her guilt by the fact that she did not appear on the stand in her own defense. She was sentenced to 20 years to life. At her first parole hearing in 2007, she was admonished for her lack of remorse. Appearing before the parole board again in 2009, she admitted killing Tammy Lynn. When she became eligible again in 2011, she explained, "After the deaths of my other children, I just lost it, became a damaged, worthless piece of person, and when my daughter was young, in my state of mind at that time, I just believed that she was going to die also. So I just did it." She was released after a 7th attempt in 2018, aged 76. Her husband Joe was waiting for her. He had been visiting her every month for the 31 years she was in jail. The question was still asked. Why had it taken so long and so many young lives sacrificed before she was apprehended? Everyone did their jobs. Schenectady Police Chief Richard E. Nelson told the press, "But when you have a legitimate cause of death, where do you go from there?" The New York Times offered vindication, saying, "There were 6 autopsies, but never any signs of abuse. There were whispers and suspicions, but somehow no one, not the police, the coroner, doctors, social workers, or neighbors, not even Mrs. Tinning's husband, detected something evil in the strange pattern of deaths."